What's up, guys? This is Heis, and welcome back to Stories from the Shop. We have another set of stories, particularly from BNSF today. And what we're going to be talking about is specifically injuries. Injuries, you've got an owie, it hurts, you need to get it fixed, right? That's a very simple thing to understand. But when it becomes the context of the workplace environment, particularly one at a very large company, particularly one in a dangerous environment, it becomes a bit of a frustrating, stupid, socio-political, dumb game. Like, there is the legitimate thing of somebody got hurt and you don't want people to get hurt, and safety's the whole thing, and it's not sexy to talk about, but very important, and everyone hopefully understands that. But there's this whole other side of things that you don't realize until you work for one of these kinds of companies that rolls into it. We're going to talk about a couple stories of a couple injuries that I can recall that happened across the system, because we had to brief on a lot of different injuries. The start of every shift, we'd have to give a safety briefing. So 3 times a day, 3 shifts at the shop. Foreman comes out and trots out all the things, the metrics. How many days injury-free are we? Like, date, injury-free, all the stuff. Like, you go through those factors first, and then you read the present briefing injuries and things before you talk about the shop, what's going on for that day, and you stretch. And it was always just like everyone's eyes would roll, and sometimes you'd read the injury report and you'd be like, you're gonna make me read this to a group of dudes who are older than me who hate my guts, at least as a young trainee, and we got along towards the end. But it's always interesting to know, like, wait, I have to read this? Basically, anytime something serious happened, the whole company would brief. Anytime anything happened in our division, the Northwest Division, worked at the Seattle shop, then we'd brief on it, no matter what craft it was. And then anything that happened in mechanical as a whole, we would also brief on. And most facilities did a pretty good job. Our facility prided ourselves on being years injury-free. I want to say when I left, we were 3 years injury-free, over 3 years injury-free, more than 1,000 days, certainly. And was that entirely true? Well, again, that gets to the fun, gamified nature of it. What do you classify as an injury? And we'll get into that. But first, a couple of fun stories. So I saved the text for a couple of these. I took pictures because some of them were just so hilarious. So I'll read you one of these so you can understand the general, this is the legalese of this is how this goes. And from there, I'll just tell the stories. But it's important to understand the ridiculous footer and header that get put around these things. So, here is an injury that happened a number of years back, and thankfully not too big of one, but this is one you read before you give the briefing and you go, oh my god, I have to say that to a room of, adult kindergartners? Great, So here we are. This is a Northwest Division report of an employee medical incident that resulted in the employee receiving medical attention. The employee involved was a switchman with 10 years and 5 months of service. The employee has had 0 reportable injuries and 1 non-reportable injury. Incident details. At approximately 2000, the foreman on this job began choking on a piece of meat during his meal period. The employee was able to clear his airway, allowing him to talk and breathe, but he could not fully dislodge the meat and began vomiting. The employee was transported by ambulance to a place, blah, blah, blah. We don't need to get into the personal details or anything like that. Somebody choked. Why'd you have to write it that way? Like, yes, that is actually genuinely a serious medical thing that happened and required treatment, but choked on a piece of meat. Whoever wrote that incident report wanted to mess with every supervisor across all of the division. Duh. But that's the kind of legal, they always put what craft, what was the details, how many years of service have they had, how many injuries have they had. You need all the statistics, and you can watch every eyeball in the room glaze over when you're talking about that. So, when you bring up choked on a piece of meat, then everyone, what? And then the room erupts into laughter and you can't control the briefing anymore. Ask me how I know. Always ridiculous. So, choked on a piece of meat. The dude was okay. So he did end up going to the hospital apparently, but, chew your food, I guess. Shrug. That sucks, and it's happened to many people, but yeah, that is technically an injury, right? He did have to go get treatment, so. But please word that in a different way. One of the fun, perennial kind of, really? You're gonna write an incident report for this? Which, in some cases, you could really understand, certainly. This would depend on the situation. Bug bites. A bee sting. There are many reports we had to brief on where somebody got stung by a bee. And in the one that I had saved, somebody got stung by a bee. They noticed irritation and requested medical attention, so they went to the urgent care, got it looked at, and the doctor was like, yep, you got stung by a bee. So that's the case of the employee did not want to finish his shift. Again, a little bit of politics. Hey, injury, this happened, let's go do it. Like, yeah, obviously bee sting hurts and it sucks, but really, like, it's very much one different thing if you have an allergy to that sort of thing. I'm not trying to downplay that, and I'm not trying to be bleh. If you're, not allergic, you had no problems, and okay, but can we go to the urgent care, please? Yeah, somebody got assigned to a job they didn't want to do, and found a way out of it. Congrats. Particular ones that also tended to ruin the briefing room were anything that ever happened to supervisors. There was one specifically talking about somebody who's a supervisor at a location climbing on top of a desk using a rolling chair to adjust the clock after daylight savings time and falling out of the chair and hitting their head, which, not ideal, but, like, come on, man. Rolling chair, really? And you file the incident report as a supervisor? That's real easy way to earn favor, because, like, the safety of people was one of the big metrics that was focused on, which is understandable. So, like, as a human being, as my me being a supervisor for my people at the shop, I didn't want to see anybody get hurt ever. No doubt, no ifs, ands, or buts about that. I cared about my people. I had, a good working relationship with pretty much everyone, even the people that were challenging, and I tried to be friendly with everybody because I wanted it to be a good environment at work, and I genuinely didn't want to see anyone get hurt. That all aside, but the corporate nature and the kind of perverted making it a whole thing and making it a metric, and your boss's boss's boss is getting less of a bonus if somebody gets hurt. It makes it feel a little disingenuous in some ways, the way it's paraded around and made, and that added to some of the politics. So a supervisor filing an injury report like that, obviously it sounds like they did actually get hurt. That must have been great for that shop and upper management fun conversation. But man, it ruined the briefing room every time, because you get to talk about the supervisor climbing on the desk and everyone goes, yeah, idiot. And you're like, I have nothing to say to that. Yeah, but you're probably right. They were probably being dumb. Don't climb on the chair that has wheels on it. What can I say? But perhaps the one that got me the most actually sounded like it was, a bad situation for the employee. It sounded like they were okay after time, but it was just the most, like, Three Stooges slapstick level description, the way that the injury was written out, that it has always stuck with me. I mean, technically the employee was breaking a rule. Whatever. There was a conductor on some train, and he was getting his lunch out from the water cooler, and he pulled out an avocado, and he pulled out a full-size chef knife to pit said avocado. Against company policy to have blades that large, and also it would shrug, choice, whatever, details. And as he's about to pit the avocado, the train went over a hard bump, and he stabbed himself in the hand with the chef's knife. Ouch. Serious injury, like, not downplaying that. But the Three Stooges moment comes in when he sees the blood and faints, falls out of the conductor's chair, down the steps into the toilet, like the front of the nose of like an SD-40, fell down into there and like passed out. And it's just like, genuine injury. But did you have to do it like Larry, Moe, and Curly? It's like, oh, you feel bad, but also it's just this comedy of errors in the way that it happened. Shrug. Always lessons learned. don't bring the chef's knife to peel an avocado for your lunch. There are ways to have avocado like ready prepped so that you don't have to cut one open and do the thing on the road. There are ways to have that without it oxidizing. Like, there are steps that we could do here. But anyway, the Looney Tunes nature of that one always kind of got me. And I don't mean to make the person did get hurt, but they healed and they were fine. And what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? I'm not trying to minimize the injury here. One that was a little interesting and that gets into the politics was one that we had at our shop. The only one, well, we had two injuries, I guess, we had 3 injuries that we'll talk about from our shop. 2 while I was there. One that was before my time, which is the horrifying one that we'll get to. We'll finish with that one because it's the worst one I've ever heard of, at least in terms of a shop that I had worked at. Like, holy crap. But there were 2 before that, and they were both kind of political in one way or another, more so than a real true injury, right? So one, we had a pipe fitter who was frequently a relief supervisor, who is a nice guy and a hardworking guy in many aspects, but kind of a contentious figure. Anyone who was frequently being a relief supervisor got looked at as you're being one of them, and then the power dynamic of, I'm your fellow craftsman, but I'm acting as the white hat right now, always made things a little bit weird. He was on shift normally, and he comes into the office as I'm sitting there with gauze wrapped around his wrist, and he's holding it. He goes, "Hey Mark, could you tie this for me?" And I go, said his name, like, do you want me to do this? He's like, "Oh no, I got a tattoo and it's healing. Like, it just like, yeah, I just need a little something. Like, could you close? It's no big deal." And I'm like, you sure? You need to say anything else? Like, why are you? Clearly, he was totally lying and wanted to get my goat. Whatever. It was being a pain in the butt about it. He wanted to see what I would do, probably just playing the class clown thing a little bit, different class clown in this case. But it was just like, don't come to me with medical stuff and ask me to do something, because it's like, I'm supposed to do something about this. But oh no, it's just my tattoo. It's still healing. He had no tattoo there. Whatever. Details. We'll worry about that one later. It was quite funny. The other one that was a little bit less fun was bizarre to me, where I had a laborer staying over. And recall the laborers moved around the locomotives at the shop. They cleaned them, they would sand them, and supply them with crew packs and stuff like that, as well as cleaning the shop in general. And this one was, I believe, pretty much inherently political. Long time ago, and the facility's closed, so who cares? But there was the long discussion of the sanding system being ancient at Interbay. It was, probably from GN, if not GN, BN. Ancient system. It didn't really work right. It had a bunch of rust holes in it, so water would get in, and it was Seattle, so there was plenty of water to get in, which means the sand wouldn't flow. It was always this contentious thing. There were always complaints about it, and there was talk of getting a new system installed, and there was always, maybe it'll be in the budget, and hemming and hawing, and nothing ever really got done about it. And so I think this was the move to try and push for the new system, which did come. I don't think it was shortly thereafter this one. It was maybe a year or so later, but that's pretty quick in railroad industry terms. I had one of the laborers who was a genuinely pleasant guy, and I several times realized that I had messed up his day, and I always apologized, and because I felt really bad. Like, genuinely, anytime I did something, I was like, oh my god, I ruined this guy's day by the way I did this, or I made something really inconvenient, the way I asked them to move stuff, or I wasn't thinking of what he was doing, and I genuinely felt bad. So I would always apologize to him at the end of the shift, and he goes, "That's okay, in about 5 minutes, you don't matter anymore." And it's like, he doesn't care about his, once he's out of his job, he doesn't care, and that's that, and that's fine. Okay. I wanted to have a genuine relationship with everybody, but not everyone wants to, and that's understandable. You can only be committed as far as you can be, I guess. But as such, having that attitude, this was also an individual that liked to employ a lot of malicious compliance. I remember me early in training not understanding what I was asking them to move some stuff, and them making sure to be extra safe in the slick conditions and move the cut about a mile an hour and safety stop every other car. Yeah, details. So when this individual comes up to me and handed me a written note and said, oh yeah, by the way, like the sand hose came out and it pinched my finger a little bit. Like you could see, look, take a look. I couldn't see anything, but whatever, maybe it did, who cares? But it was a written statement, and he said, oh yeah, no, I got pinched by this. I don't think I'm injured. I don't need medical attention. It had the same level of legalese in it. It's like, oh. And so I texted a picture of the note to my boss. Boss calls me and is like, you need to get no, he can't leave. You have to hold him there, and we gotta get pictures and reenact the whole thing, and blah, blah. Out came the red carpet for everything. And so this is the injury. I was like, oh my god, this happened. It happened on my shift, and it was like this thing that this wasn't really an injury, but it is, and it's going to count towards the thing because it's a whatever, and that means we won't get our safety feed. If we didn't have an injury for 30 days, we would get like a special meal every shift. We'd cook steaks usually and veggies and all the fun, and the upper management would come barbecue them, and it was great, and you got it every month because we were injury free every month. And this ruined our streak of like 900 days or whatever it was. The next day, when upper management had talked, oh, it wasn't an injury, it was a human-factored incident. Corporations are just bullshit, man. Okay, so last but not least, I hinted to it earlier, there was one particularly bad injury that happened at Interbay that was a story passed down to me. I don't know when it happened. I don't know what happened or who it happened to, but I got told the story and how it happened, and it was kind of horrifying. It was a thing that added a new safety protection, and very rightfully so. And my goodness, yeah. I'll spare all of the details on it because it was pretty gnarly. But yeah, this was the worst injury that I had ever heard about in our shop. And it was somebody operating the wheel machine. And now about some of you who know what a wheel machine is have just had the color drain out of your face. The rest of you, the wheel machine is a special giant machining tool that's built into the track that grabs the wheels and then it spins them, and it has big lathe cutters that cut the profile back into the wheel. So if you've got a defect, it grabs it and spins it, and it's basically a special lathe built into the track so you don't have to remove the wheel sets like we used to. We had one in Interbay. It was fantastic. Here's what it looks like. I was like, I don't think I ever took a picture, but there was a war bonnet on it the one day, so I did take a picture of it. It's the big green thing down below. And it's a huge machine. I mean, it spans the track and then some, because it's got to have a lot of power to be able to spin a whole railroad wheel set and hold the locomotive and all that while it does it. Basically has to support the weight of that axle, which is not light. The axle and what that axle holds, right? So as the wheel machine goes, depending on how much you're truing, I mean, it takes a lot of steel out. And as such, the chip removal was kind of automated. There was a conveyor belt down at the bottom that everything would pivot down into, and it would go up to a vertical belt that would then take it and dump it out in a scrap canister that was pretty sizable. Needed a big forklift to move outside the building. And that way, if you run any machine tools, you have to break chip and clean the chip every now and again. You still had to clean the chips here and there and move them around and make sure they weren't collecting, but you had a way to get them out of the building and out of the workspace. If you're connecting the dots now, yeah. So what happened was the machinist that was operating the wheel machine, I think it might have been on a second or a third shift where there were a few people around. There was no timer-based safety stop on the machine. Of course, it had emergency shutoffs and things like that. But there was no, hey, dead man switch, like, are you still there? I'm going to power down, which is what was added after this, where the machinist that was working on it was checking and clearing chips on something. He fell in the conveyor and got sucked up into the vertical conveyor chute, and the conveyor kept running. I don't want to give the description that I got, but very, very, very unpleasant things happened to all of his legs. And had he not received medical attention when he did, would have almost assuredly died from blood loss. Yeah. So somebody found him like an hour or two later, went to check and see, and because the machine was so loud, no one heard the screaming. Oh, I remember getting told that. It was just like, oh my God. It's like that is the thing. That is what makes safety important to talk about in the railroad context. We deal with big machines. We deal with heavy machines, powerful machines. Anything that you have to do to those machines mechanically is big, heavy, and powerful and will ruin your day or end your life like that. This guy got lucky, and I mean, how horrifying, but he didn't die, but that's why we have that safety interlock now. The machinists would occasionally complain about it, and this story came up when an apprentice was like, man, it's annoying, I have to press this button every 30 seconds to make sure the machine doesn't shut down. It's that or that. And then the complaints about the button pressing went away. Funny how that happens. So, I mean, it's a very sobering thing to hear about and horrifying to think like, oh no, that happened at this shop in this space. And every shop has injuries and stuff that happen like that, but that's what we truly try to prevent. And that was always kind of the disconnect for me, was talking about safety and making it real. Hearing that kind of story, that makes it so real and so important and is sobering to hear and understand, and is important to talk about and make sure that you're not being complacent and all of that sort of thing, right? The kind of corporate BS, safety garbage, and the talking about bee sting or whatever, it's like, it just makes everyone rolls their eyes. Like, be genuine about it, you know? And it felt so fakey, corporate, icky, which was a big reason why I didn't stick around at the railroad for much longer than I did. But anyways, guys, hope you found some of those funny, enjoyable. Hope you learned something, and I hope you appreciate safety, and I hope you understand I'm not trying to make a light of any of these things or, you know, be happy that people were injured. I mean, and all of those were valid to some extent, right? So, always a tough thing. But hope you guys enjoyed this one. As always, thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch y'all next time.